In Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about what will happen on the day of judgment. يَوْمَ يَجْمُعُ اللَّهُ الرُّسُلِ, when Allah will gather the messengers, and He will ask them, what was the reception that they received among humankind? And then He will ask Isa alayhi salam specifically, أَأَنْتَ قُلْتَ لِلنَّاسِ اتَّخِذُونِي وَأُمِّيَ إِلَهَيْنِ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Did you say to people, take me and my mother as two gods besides Allah? He will say, Subhanak, glory be to you. مَا يَكُونُ لِي أَنْ أَقُولَ مَا لَيْسَ لِي بِحَقٍّ. It was not right, it would not have been right for me to say something that I had no right to say. If I had said it, you would have known it. You know what is in my mind, but I don't know what is in your mind. You are You are the knower of the unseen. مَا قُلْتُ لَهُمْ إِلَّا مَا أَمَرْتَنِي بِهِ. I did not say to them except that which you commanded me with. أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ رَبِّي وَرَبَّكُمْ. This is what I told them. Worship Allah, my Lord and your Lord. And in fact, one will find statements of this nature in the Bible as well, which our Christian friends are reading. But somehow they haven't paid attention to this because their minds have been trained by their sermons to not pay such close attention to these passages. They're reading it and they're understanding something else. So for example, in Mark's Gospel it is mentioned that a man came to Isa alayhi salam and said to him, "Good teacher, what must I do to have eternal life?" And Isa alayhi salam replied, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone." So, to any normal reading, this would mean that Isa alayhi salam is saying, don't mistake me for God. Like you speak, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. Like, don't praise me that much. Even though, there's no harm if I say, my good brother. No harm, right? He's good, Allah is good, but in an infinite manner. We're not confusing the two. But in this story, it is obvious that Isa alayhi salam wants to make it so clear that he's not God, that he's not even accepting this kind of praise. Somebody comes to him, "Good master." He's saying, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone." So how do our Christian friends read this? How are they trained to read this? When they come to this, they say, "Oh, you know what? Because he was God, and this man who came and called him good teacher or good master didn't yet recognize that he is God. Isa alayhi salam is trying to tell him, think about what you're saying. If you think I'm good, that means you must recognize that I am God." You see, they are reading so much into the simple statement. Simple statement, Isa alayhi salam is denying that he is God. But the way they're trained to read it is the exact opposite. It's munqalab, turned on its head, the opposite of what it was saying in the first place. So where does the Muslim come in? Our Muslim brothers and sisters, you have to help your Christian friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, your classmates to see their own Bible, but with the insight that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. You have to help them to break out of that shell of misunderstanding so that they can actually pay close attention to the very words that is there in the book that they say is the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. We have to ask them, why don't you pay close attention to it and read it in a normal way and see what Isa alayhi salam was saying to his people. We're now approaching what is referred to as Good Friday. If I were here next week, I would have saved this khutbah for next Friday. But I'm priming you in advance because now you have to understand what is Good Friday and what do our friends believe about this and how do you engage them in conversation about it. Good Friday, they say, is the day when Isa alayhi salam was crucified. And they say that a couple of days later, on the Sunday morning, his female followers went to the tomb where he was laid to rest, and they found that the tomb was open and the body was not there. And later on, the disciples started to see visions of Isa alayhi salam. And they were convinced that he had died on the cross and he was now alive again, meeting with them. And then eventually he was taken up, they say, some 40 days later after meeting with them, eating and drinking and so on. So how do you approach this? First, from the Quran. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, again I refer to Surah Al Imran in the 54th ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this, قَالَ اللَّهُ يَا عِيسَى, when Allah said, "O Jesus, إِنِّي مُتَوَفِّيكَ وَرَافِعُكَ إِلَيَّ, I am going to take you and raise you to myself." So what is this? I'm going to take you. This is a verbal noun, إِنِّي مُتَوَفِّيكَ, I am mutawaffi of you. So what does it mean? It means Allah is going to take you. That's the most literal meaning. This verb in Arabic, tawaffa, also is used for death, as a euphemism, as a nice way of speaking of death. So if we look at a book that's written by an old scholar of Islam, it'll be mentioned on the book, Tuwuffiya sana kadha. He means he passed away in such and such a year. The same verb, but now in the passive voice. He has been taken in such a year. We mean Allah took him, meaning in death, right? But a person might be taken also in sleep. And so we find in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يَتَوَفَّى الْأَنفُسَ حِينَ مَوْتِهَا وَالَّتِي لَمْ تَمُتْ فِي مَنَامِهَا. Allah takes the soul when it dies, and that which did not die in its sleep. So as for the one that is taken in death, Allah retains that one. The one that is taken in sleep, Allah puts that one back in the body, so the person is awake again. So that taking by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could be in sleep or in death. So we say something about this is left to Allah Azza wa Jal. We don't know everything, and as Isa alayhi salam says, we do not know what is in the mind of Allah. We only go by what is clear, and we leave the rest to Allah Azza wa Jal. So now we come to the other side. Our Christian friends will say, but wait, he came out of his tomb, he met with his disciples, and so he must have explained the whole story to his disciples. And now his disciples must have known the true story, and then the true story was transmitted from one generation to the next until we have it today. So what we have is the truth, and what you guys have must not be truth. This is the way they will put it to you. So we can say to them, okay, tell me what you have. Read me the stories that are mentioned there in the Gospels, and let's see if these stories actually add up. You will find numerous discrepancies in these stories, and not just on little details. You'll find many discrepancies on little details as well, but the most significant things you will find are discrepant between them. So, for example, there are 4 Gospels, as you know, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Where would you find this story about the women coming to the tomb and discovering it to be empty? You'll find it in the last chapter of all of the 4 Gospels, except the 4th one. In the 4th one, it's the one before the last chapter. And the reason for that is that because after the story ended, somebody tacked on another chapter to that last of the 4 Gospels. Okay, so that's why you have, in that Gospel, you have to go to the chapter before the last one. So now, with this little bit of knowledge, you are equipped. If somebody comes to your door, they say, okay, we want to discuss with you the differences between Islam and Christianity. Okay, come on in. Have some samosa. Now we can discuss. Read to me the last chapter of each of your 4 Gospels. So now they read to you the last of each chapter. Now, by now, you have forgotten which one was it that had the extra chapter. When they read the last chapter of the Gospel according to John, you will realize, okay, we need to go 1 chapter before it to get the same story, right? Okay. So now, basically, the 4 Gospels are telling you that the women came to the tomb and telling you what happened, what they saw. Starts with Matthew's Gospel. This is the first that is mentioned in the Bible. So Matthew's Gospel says that the women came, and as they were coming, behold, an angel came down and rolled away the stone from the mouth of the tomb and sat on the stone. And he told the women that you're seeking Jesus, but he's not here. He has been raised up. But tell his disciples that he's going before you to Galilee. There I have told you. Okay, so now, what do you think the women are going to do now? They're going to go tell the disciples, right? Look, we came, we saw the angel, and Jesus has been raised from the dead. True? That's natural. Okay, let's go to John's Gospel with this expectation in mind. John's Gospel says that now it's only described as one woman, but later on she speaks in the plural we, so we're not going to make too much of that. So the one woman or women came. Her name is given as Mary Magdalene, focusing on the one. So John's Gospel says that Mary Magdalene came, and when she came, she found that the tomb was already open. The stone had been taken away. So that means she's not seeing any angel here coming to do it, because this will be a strange way to describe it if there's an angel coming and in her face the angel is taking away the stone. So then, when she found the tomb in this condition, she ran to the disciples of Jesus, the Hawariyin, the Ashab Isa alayhi salam. So now she says to them, they have taken away the Lord, and we don't know where they have put him. Why would she say something like this if she had just seen an angel, as the other gospel described? If the angel told her, you're looking for Jesus, but he's not here, look at the place where he used to be, but God has raised him from the dead. Why didn't she go tell them that the angel spoke to us and told us that God raised him from the dead? Why is she telling them somebody has stolen the body? You can see that these two gospels are so very discrepant that either one of them or both of them are incorrect about what happened. And if you read the four gospels and you look for such clues, you will see that they are so very discrepant on the basic facts of the story that you realize that these stories were put together later on. It's not original memory that you have here. It's later on when people say, oh, well, Jesus was raised from the dead. How do you know he was raised from the dead? Well, his tomb was discovered empty. So if his tomb was discovered empty, how come we never heard about this? So Mark's gospel ends by saying, when the women went and they saw the tomb was empty and the angel spoke to them, actually just as a young man, but let's assume he's an angel in the disguise of a young man. When this young man spoke to the women and told them the same thing, that you're looking for Jesus, he's not here, he has been raised, go tell the disciples to go to Galilee, there they will see him. The women fled from the tomb and they said nothing to anybody because they were afraid. Christian scholars interpreting this today say that it looks like Mark put it in this way to explain why the story was not known at the time when Mark was writing, some 40 years after this event. So 40 years after the event, Mark wants to say, okay, the tomb was discovered empty, and people are naturally going to say, how come we didn't hear this story before? You mean the tomb was discovered empty and we didn't know it? So Mark's answer to that is, yeah, you see, the people who discovered it empty, the women, they didn't tell anybody. That's Mark's answer to the question. So now, to have it that the women discovered the tomb empty, that also is another, as scholars have put it, an apologetic response. To say, okay, well, the women discovered it empty, and yes, eventually they told the disciples, but the disciples took it for nonsense. They didn't believe it at the time. That's why the story is late in coming. So this shows that it's actually late in coming. It means that the stories are put together after the fact. Sometimes people say, well, of course the stories will be discrepant because 4 different writers writing from 4 different points of view. It's like witnessing an accident. Somebody focused on the car, somebody focused on the person who was struck dead, some people focused on the people who gathered on the scene. So naturally they write from different viewpoints, and there's going to be some discrepancy because they're humans. But then you are admitting that this is not the word of God because it's discrepant because human authors. But here we see that the discrepancy is on the major details, not the minor details. It's about, whether the sightings of Jesus were in Jerusalem as the Gospel of Luke maintains, or in Galilee, as you have just heard me say, the angels instructed the women according to Matthew and Mark. You can't have it both ways. It's like somebody saying the intersection happened in Toronto, and somebody else said the intersection happened in Ajax. It's two different things. So you can't have it both ways. So what does this all leave us with? It leaves us with the obligation to share the message of Islam with our friends.